Dune is a flawless masterpiece. It accomplishes exactly what it sets out for, and does so with a unique voice that remains unique even after so many other authors and storytellers have borrowed from it. And I don't use the term masterpiece lightly. You see, I had the opposite preconceptions. I'm going to break down several elements of this book that are each flawless on their own, and then I'm going to illustrate how these all expertly weave together the prose. Now, Frank Herbert generally stays transparent, where the prose mainly serves as an engine to get information to the reader without getting much in the way. The words don't draw attention to themselves, except Herbert knows when to go against this and douse us in experience with a beautiful line or two, and it never overstays its welcome either. For example, the first rock shingle, like a beach, slanting from the sand. This genius bit of description gives us the clear concept that the rock formation that they're going towards is a beach, and the dunes themselves are the sea. And it does two jobs at once. You see, now we know that our protagonist, Paul Atreides, and his mother, Lady Jessica, are going towards this beach within the Dune Sea. When I'm working on a completed draft, one of the things I'm always keeping an eye out for is getting a sentence to do two jobs at once, or even three. Things like this appear simple to a reader, but are extremely difficult to do from the other side. And Dune is riddled with moments like this, and that naturally brings us to the next pillar of perfection that is this book, and that is Frank Herbert's pacing. I swear to God, if this first Dune book was written today, it would be 1,000 pages and only go through half the story, and you'd have to buy the next book to get the other half. It goes places, and quickly, but it knows when to take a breath, not to settle on too obvious of a rhythm as not to summon a Shai-Hulud. And because of how much attention Herbert paid to his word economy, none of the most important scenes overstay their welcome either, and none of it is self-aggrandizing. The moments are important because they're important, not because they're being told that they're important. And so there is no intellectual shrinkflation at the cost of overstated emotion. And that leads us to the characters. Paul, Stilgar, Chani, Lady Jessica, Duke Leto Atreides, the Harkonnens, all of them are so brilliantly unique, and like a holofoil trading card, their lives seem to extend past the page. And Paul's journey itself is profound, trying to stop a jihad that will occur because of his own success, one that will be committed in his name. And yet, of course, failure is still not an option, and so he's trying to find which path to go, trying to break the future and create a new one. And because of the POV, because we're able to get snapshots of these characters' perspectives from behind their eyes, we develop an educated expectation with each of these characters, and none of them betray that. They exceed the expectations. There is an ever-present tension from so many different directions all at once. And I've just touched on it a little bit, but the next pillar is perspective. Most novels are either written in first person from the eyes of the protagonist, or third person where the camera is pulled back just a little bit, but it's still focused on our central character and everything's still colored, everything's limited. You still have the tone of that protagonist affecting the novel. But Frank Herbert wrote this in omniscient viewpoint, which on many occasions I've seen fail. Usually it tends to be the harbinger of over-description or wooden dialogue. This is dangerous ground, but Frank Herbert has navigated the drum sand and found his way to something truly special. There are no artificially hidden secrets that seem lazy or over-convenient. Right from the very beginning of the novel, and this isn't a spoiler, you're told right from the beginning that Dr. Yue is going to betray House Atreides. You know that he's the bad guy, and really bad things are coming. And yet the tension isn't diminished because of this. Instead, it's elevated. The whodunit mechanism that would have been the obvious choice for any other author concerning this story is done away with and replaced with the turmoil of this man, Dr. Yue, who loves and respects the people he's about to stab in the back. He doesn't want to do this, but he's forced to because of his position, because he's true to his own character based on what we know about him. And as time goes on, it makes more and more sense. And this doesn't disappear. This particular plot strand exists all the way till the very last few chapters of the book. And all the while, the reader sits with this weight, waiting for the crysknife to come swinging. Finally, that leads us to the plot. Now, I talked about it how third person and first person are colored by the protagonist, and it's interesting because in any other case, this wouldn't be so. But the story is colored by Paul Atreides because he himself has moments, increasingly common moments of omniscience. So we have an omniscient perspective and we have an omniscient protagonist. And so it just makes sense. It couldn't have been told in any other way. And you can imagine being able to glimpse into the future is an incredible tool. How is there any danger? Well, we're explicitly told that Paul can still die. Many of these futures end with the end of his life, and he's constantly trying to sidestep these things and make an alternative decision. So even though he can see all these paths, he can't take any of them. Before we get into spoilers, I wanted to talk about the Fremen a little bit. The way they deprive themselves of water is almost like depriving themselves of want or desire, something that us humans even on Earth seem incapable of. It's like torture, right? But they do this believing that their asceticism is going to lead to a grand change of their entire planet. Their whole world will change because they don't take this instantaneous gratification right now. In my first impression video, I already covered the first little chunk of the book. This will be on part 2 and 3, Muad'Dib and the Prophet. Oh, my eyes, so much sand in my eyes, so much spice in my eyes. Now, I really thought Duncan Idaho would come back. He was just this really hyped up character and he's just freaking dead. But it was so cool to see Gurney come back. I was really, really happy. But it was also this like bittersweet kind of tension building moment because you see that Hawat's Swiss cheese logic, how he believes that Lady Jessica was the one who is responsible for the betrayal and the fall of House Atreides, that has leaked its way into Gurney's understanding. And so he is planning, you get his thoughts directly, to kill Lady Jessica, but only after Paul finds out, of course. Speaking of Hawat, these moments of his where he's trying to calculate all this stuff, but he doesn't have all the information to do so, it gets you to just like squeeze the pages as you're reading them. You're so freaking mad at Hawat. You just want to slap him back to reality. Also, from what I understand, Paul taking on the name Muad'Dib, the mouse, was sort of like a joke almost, because it was something he hadn't done in any other reality. He chose to take that one so that he would avoid all of the possible futures that he'd seen up until that point. Now, page 408 had my favorite pre-chapter epigraph. The concept of progress acts as a protective mechanism to shield us from the terrors of the future. That made me consider how this is a far future story where things have seemed to regress just as much as they have progressed. Now, there are many real-world examples I could go into this if I wanted to, but you're not here for the real world, you're here for science fiction like me. Also, I was astounded at the revelation that Chani was Liet's daughter. That was just beautiful, because it's like this marrying of dynasties in a way that just happened naturally. It wasn't a thing that Paul was trying to do, he just loved this girl. And by the way, there was something really special about the relationship in this book that I feel was kind of lost in the Dune Part 2 movie. We'll go into that a little bit later. I'm sure everyone else felt this way, but from really early on, I wanted to see Paul kill the Baron Harkonnen really bad. I wanted to see him die so bad. But it was interesting how satisfying it was to have Paul's sister instead kill him with the Gom Jabbar of all things. He dies like an animal. And once again, with the second movie, this is directly stated, which is a little bit frustrating because it was a beautiful thing to have Aaliyah do that. And I've said it before, but it's funny how that child genius thing comes up in so many different sci-fi stories. It worked really well here, but it also worked really well in Ender's Game, Ender's Shadow, Beggars in Spain, Odd John. But Aaliyah was especially interesting, considering the fact that she was essentially birthed by Lady Jessica drinking an Alzabo analeptic, physically changing the chemical structure of the poison once inside of her and having that affect her unborn child. Speaking of the water of life, things got a little weird right at the end of part 2. It's sci-fi, it's gonna happen, but when the Fremens kind of all got freaky with each other all at once, I was so happy that Paul and Chani decided to go off somewhere else. And their moment of pure connection was done so beautifully, so subtly, and yet directly and unmistakably, it was just pure poetry. I thought it was gorgeous. It was one of those moments where he pulls back that transparency. So good, so good. And it managed to move the plot forward a little bit because we have Chani getting sort of like a contact high of seeing the future. They both know they're destined to have a kid together. I can understand why they wouldn't want to put that in the second movie, maybe a time constraint, but to me, it felt like that was what sealed the deal with Paul and Chani. And when their infant, Leto II, what a tragedy, when he dies, I still wonder if that propelled Paul to like give up on trying to avoid the jihad, if he's just like, screw it, just let it happen. I don't know if that's what happened at the end or if he's still avoiding it. Let's talk a little bit about Feyd-Rautha. Number one, I was under the impression that this guy wasn't gonna die. I thought he was going to make it through and be like the big bad guys throughout the entire series. I was super, super wrong about that. But he is a complex, really cool character. It was interesting seeing the difference between House Harkonnen and House Atreides, how the Harkonnens are constantly trying to stab each other in the back and go for more power, while the Atreides are all about honor, trying to boost each other up. But Dr. Yue shows that that honor is why the Atreides house fell. So either approach really has its dangers. But man, the actual knife fight between Feyd-Rautha and Paul Atreides, ooh, that was awesome. May thy knife chip and shatter. God damn, that was so cool. Yeah, just like how Herbert knows how to dial back on the transparency, he also knows how to step on the gas for the action scenes. That was just pure adrenaline, just boom, 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 boom. You never know what's gonna happen next. I fucking loved it. And after all this hyping up of how Count Fenring was super dangerous and he can kill pretty much anyone else in the book without trying, it was really cool to find out that he was like a failed Kwisatz Haderach, however you say it. And it was so interesting when instead of being a pawn of the Bene Gesserits in this moment, he decides to have some agency and refuses to fight Paul. He's like, nah, I'm good. I know so little about him, and yet his character already commands so much respect. And with all these years that Hawat spent with this belief that Lady Jessica was evil, that she was the traitor, sitting there with his skill, almost like a musician who has all of the knowledge, but none of the feel, he's suddenly confronted with the truth. What a tragic character. Yet he is redeemed. But while Gurney is redeemed in life, Hawat is redeemed in death. I was caught off guard with this one. You knew a tragedy was on the way, but you didn't know how it would resolve. And it resolved in such an eloquent, such a specific and unique way that it just felt right. But it was heartbreaking. And this particular epigraph brilliantly establishes the trap that he was in. Deep in the human unconscious is a pervasive need for a logical universe that makes sense. But the real universe is always one step beyond logic. But again, Paul reuniting with Gurney felt like a fresh breath. It felt like you're coming home again in a way. It's like this last piece of the Atreides family has kind of come back. And it was so beautiful, and yet we do have that scene where it's Lady Jessica bound by Gurney and she has like a knife at her throat and Paul has to talk him down. And the omniscient viewpoint put in some serious work here again because it could go any way. And here's the beauty, here's the fucking genius of Frank Herbert. It was completely understandable if Lady Jessica were to be killed at this moment. It would have made complete sense, it would have been sad, it would have been heartbreaking, but the reader would have forgiven him for this because all the pieces were in place to have it happen. But these characters are not incapable of communication. These characters are not so stupid to be completely owned by emotion because they're not animals, they're humans. That is what they strive for, and that is what they succeed at. And so through that communication, Paul convinces Gurney to lower his blade. He feels ashamed. You have this moment where Lady Jessica essentially communicates that like, just kill me now because this hurts so bad to be at odds with someone that I love immensely. And it was just so beautiful. But yeah, that tension that began with Yue's betrayal, you see how that lasted throughout the entire novel and comes up in places that are expected, but still a surprise. And in the end, it just makes Paul more likable. The fact that he's able to connect with these characters and communicate with them and is able to be close with them. And Stilgar is another great example of that just boosts Paul even further. The reader tends to love them, just like they loved Duke Leto Atreides. They're these people who don't just command respect, but the love of their followers. And, this has some dangers, as we see. Paul sees Stilgar sort of become, and he's starting to see Gurney sort of become more of a follower than a friend. In fact, it's stated clearly in this line, "I have seen a friend become a worshipper." Last few notes here, the whole concept of you only control what you can destroy, that was brilliant. And the fact that Paul is able to harness the water of death as opposed to the water of life to destroy all the spice, destroy the reason why Arrakis is important in the first place, and destroy the ability for interstellar travel along with it, which is something they kind of left out of the movie, it seemed like. Man, that was incredibly significant. Oh, and another important thing, the fact that the Fremen are this elite fighting class because they had to grow and sustain themselves on the desolate world of Arrakis, just like the Emperor's planet, like Sakuna Matata? No, what was it? Salazar Secundus. Salazar Slytherin. Anyway, the fact that they are this elite fighting class and the Emperor feels challenged by that because the Sardaukar are a product of their own turmoil on that prison planet, it's really, really cool. It just makes a lot of sense. And what a way to end the book. I thought it was gorgeous, and the fact that this was left out of the movie was sinful, it feels like. "We who carry the name of concubine, history will call us wives." It puts everything into context, especially about how the epigraphs are written by Princess Irulan this entire time, and you come to understand that she is this neglected wife of Paul on paper, but he of course loves Chani. I don't know, I gotta read the sequels to see how that all pans out, of course, but it seems to me that she's just kind of locked away and forced to just document all this stuff. The fact that Jessica and Duke Leto have such a similar sort of relationship as Paul does with Chani in this case, where they're not officially married, but they are in every other sense. I mean, it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. Look, I had a blast reading Dune, and the main reason I spent so long before actually reading it was because I was afraid that it would influence me too much as a writer. But I'm not afraid of that anymore because I've filled my head up with so many great sci-fi books that this is just one more. But Dune is especially wonderful. Perhaps I was right to wait and read it. Speaking of which, I have my debut contribution to the genre of sci-fi with my novel, Lethal Circuit. It's an anti-gravity racing sci-fi space opera, and it comes out on September 26th. Check it out. Anyway, I gotta get out of here. I'll see you guys soon.